I would like, first of all, to thank you very much for inviting me to talk about my book. It certainly has been a labor of love, and I am very grateful for the opportunity to tell you all about it. It all began with a surprise birthday present of a trip to London in December 2017, organized by my son and daughter. My son had somehow arranged for a behind-the-scenes visit to see William Etty RA's pictures, sketches, paintings, papers, books and letters at the Courtauld Institute of Art, the old Royal Academy building at Somerset House in the Strand, and also at the now Royal Academy in Burlington House near Piccadilly. It was amazing, and William Etty was my great-great-great-grandfather Charles's older brother. There was already so much written about William that I had the idea that I wished to tell the story of Charles, his younger brother, and all that he had achieved in his lifetime, because he was successful in his own right. There were further visits with my son to the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge and Anglesey Abbey in Quay, where they had paintings and pictures of William Etty. Luckily, too, I had a book written by Alexander Gilchrist in 1855, just after William's demise, which was in 1849. This book was written based on documents and recollections of his contemporaries, but it also gave a great deal of information for me, for my book, on the Etty family. So I found information in other books as well, but that was a really good start. Then came visits to the York Archives and emails to the Borthwick Institute in York about the graves of my families in York, and the British Library, of course, to see the fantastic collection of ship's logs, pay books, ledgers of all the East India Company ships. They actually have about 10 miles worth of East India Company's ship's logs under the British Library. I find that amazing, how many they've got. So a visit to the African and Asian Reading Room in the British Library is very well worth a visit. I was also able to visit my cousin in Holland, who has a wealth of information about the family and original letters of Charles's. He has about 19, of which he did give me one. And that letter was really important for me because my great-great-great-grandfather Charles wrote the letter and gave the letter to my great-great-grandfather Matthew, bring to England to his aunt then. So both of them have actually touched the letter that I now own, and that is very special to me. There are 19 of Charles's actual letters in the book. All the rest, there are 69 letters in total. All the rest were written by me in his vein of writing. And there's about 90% fact in my letters of actual things that happened. There are one or two things that I'm not sure about and I would love to go on researching. But there are 19 of his actual letters surviving, and they are in the book. And in his letters, he wrote in this crisscross writing, which I will tell you about a little bit later on the slides. I also visited a tall ship in Holland, the National Maritime Museum in Amsterdam, to give me the feel of the ships he was working on when he was 14 and a half. The illustration you see there is by the well-known international painter and muralist, Graham Rust, and I liaised with him over what I wished the picture to be. The top left, as you see, is a compass, which he always had with him. The top right that you see there in that little picture is the York Minster, which he loved dearly, as did his brother William. In the bottom left is the island of Java, which is where he landed up and had his sugar mills. And the bottom right is a sugar cane. So that's just to give you an idea. The center picture, you see the house just behind him to the left is his parents' bakery, because they had a bakery and his father was famed for his gingerbread, but also the gilding on it. He did lions and so many different things, and he was very famous for his gingerbread with these decorations on. So Charles there is sitting on the banks of the Ouse in York with a tall ship coming up, because it's tidal. The Ouse is tidal, and ships could come right up into York and unload all their goods, of which spices had come to the bakery from Indonesia and India, and the gilding as well. And I chose the blue background for the cover of the book because for me, that was the sea that he was on as and when he was actually in the ships on the East India Company and when he was a captain of his own ships. This was a painting. Charles, as I said, worked for the East India Company from 14 and a half, actually, and he rose to be a midshipman, and he did 3 journeys with them, and these journeys lasted 18 months to 2 years, because they got to Calcutta and then they had to unload the ship, and the ship had to be refitted nearly and cleaned and turned around, and it took a long time. It took a long time to go on the seas. So these journeys were very long, and he did his the amount of trips or years that he was supposed to be with the East India Company, and decided to go his own way. And he got a 5-year indenture with the East India Company, but still working for them. But he was a free mariner and a captain, and he gained his own ship to do that. His older brother, William, painted this picture for Charles just before he left on his journey. And that was, he was about 19 then when he became a free mariner, and he did not come back to England for 42 years after that. This is a Dutch East Indiaman, and this is the one I visited in Amsterdam because I wanted to get the feel of how they lived on these ships to help me with my book and the research that I was looking at. And you see how tall it is. And then they had guns, and the galley was tiny where they cooked. You see there the carpenter's area, and downstairs where the barrels were. I'm there with the bedding that they lived in, and then the middle picture on the bottom is the captain's bed, and his whole area was very spacious. You see me sitting at the captain's table, and that's what his dining table looked like. But then they had people paying to go on the ships, passengers, and they would all eat with the captain. And now Charles Weston here is my great-great-great-great-grandfather. And his family originated from West Horsley in Surrey in England, and they date back to William the Conqueror. He was born in 1790 and died in 1808. His father was William Weston, who was a registrar of the Mayor's Court in Calcutta. That picture there, the British Library owns, and he was born in Tiretta's Bazaar, and he was a Eurasian. I do not know, unfortunately, who his mother was, and I would love to find out. He married twice because his first wife, I believe, probably died young. Again, I don't know. He was an eminent citizen of Calcutta. They have a lane called Weston's Lane in the city named after him. He had an accomplished career despite the obstacles he would have faced as someone with mixed ancestry. But he began as an apprentice to the surgeon John Zephaniah Holwell, or Howell, not sure how that's pronounced, in 1711 to 1798. And he became a lifelong friend and provided Weston with capital to start his business. Weston accumulated his wealth through commerce, investment in property, and sheer luck, because in 1778, he won Tiretta's Bazaar lottery, the Calcutta lottery, which was worth 196 rupees and provided him with a monthly earning of 3,500 rupees in that time. So that was a lot of money if you translated it to today. He was an active philanthropist and said to have donated 100,000 rupees after his death into a charitable fund to be managed by the church and used towards poverty relief in Calcutta and Chinsura. He also left bequests to his many friends and dependents. And I am related to him through Charles Etty's wife. The book is about Charles Etty. Her name was Elizabeth, and it was her grandfather. These are the places that Charles visited on his journeys. You can see England there with York up at the top, and London and Portsmouth and Southampton. Portsmouth, the ships went from London, the East India Company ships, all the way around to Portsmouth, and then they left there in convoy. There wasn't just one ship that went. There were sometimes up to 6 or 8 ships that all went in convoy for protection because they needed to. They usually stopped off at Madeira, right on the left there, down to St. Helena, the Cape Town in the Cape of Good Hope, Ile-de-France, and then up. And then some of the ships went off to Bombay and round to Madras and then up to Calcutta. Now here is a map of Java and it shows his sugar mills. And you see there Wonolangan Mill. I don't know if my thing works or not, but that's Wonolangan Mill in Probolinggo. He owned Ombel Mill and Ringan Anom Mill eventually. My father, as a little aside, was born here in Surabaya. So he was actually born in Java as well. And that gives you an idea. Charles used to take post and everything to Makassar up here for the government. And there you see Borneo, all quite important with some of the letters because it was in the wartime of the French Revolution. Sorry, it was in the wartime between France and England. This is the mill, Wonolangan Mill, that Charles built in 1832. You see it in all its splendor in that picture, which was taken by one of my cousins. And the mill is still in working order and owned by that company, PT Nusantara 11, which I believe is a government-run company. So it's still in working order now, and one of my cousins from Holland recently went there and took one of my books, which I had sent him for the purpose, so that they would have a book there of my great-great-grandfather at his mill. This is the house that he built himself 2 years after he had built the mill, and that was in 1834. He said that his brother Walter, who was also a purser on the East India Company ships before he took over the business of Etty Bodley Etty in London, which had gold lace, which was taken, not taken, but it was brought from India to London. And he said that Walter would know this house. It was a middling size house, like Calcutta houses. So he built that, and I think it looks quite magnificent. He was very proud of it and asked his brother William to paint large portraits because he said he had spacious halls. And he said to William, "I hope you will send me some of your best. I will pay you for them and not beat you down." So he was never, ever did he want to owe money to his family. And he helped his brothers all through his life, financially and emotionally. The present manager of Wonolangan Mill lives here in this house now. This is one letter of Charles's. Here you see these tiny little writing. He used very, very fine airmail paper, which is very difficult to buy nowadays, actually. He had his own seal down here, as you can see. I hope my little mouse works there. But the bottom right picture, this is the one I own. And it was sent to Betsy, who was Charles's brother's daughter. And she lived and looked after William Etty in London. She was his housekeeper. And Betsy was Charles's favorite because although he was quite a bit older than her, he was brought up in the same bakery. They all lived there as a big family. And so she was like a little sister to him, and he always teased her, and she really was a real favorite of his. And as I said, in the letter, he says that it's being delivered by hand by her cousin, who was Charles's son, Matthew. And this is the letter that I have and I love. This is another of his letters, and it was written on the 22nd of March, 1846, from Wonolangan Mill. This is an example of a lot of his letters. The previous one was simple writing, and it was not called crisscross writing. This is crisscross writing. And you can see it is really difficult to read because he writes one way and then he turns the paper 90 degrees and then writes the other way. And so to try and read it and decipher it is very, very difficult. And his writing is a little bit scratchy too. So again, it was very difficult to decipher these letters, but we did it. He wrote like this to save the weight of the letter, because letters were charged by weight. So if he could write on both sides of a piece of airmail paper, if he could write crisscross, he got 4 pages onto 2. So it helped save the cost of postage to England. Next, please. This is letter 39 to his brother, William. And this was actually one of his original letters as well. And it was written on Wednesday, the 11th of October, 1837. Well, it was written between Tuesday, the 19th of September to Wednesday, the 11th of October. This is because the post wasn't always very frequent. So sometimes he had a long time to write a letter and he'd just add to it each day or when something happened. But sometimes he had to write them immediately and stay up all night to write the letter so it could go in the post the next morning. This is very poignant for me. As you can see, I highlighted this little piece in his letter, and it said, "I wish I could fly to see you all." Now, flying, actually, commercial aviation wasn't until 1914, and the first flight was on New Year's Day in Florida. So I think he knew it was coming. I don't know. What do you think? These are bookmarks I had made to go with the physical books that I have, all of them here at home in Suffolk. And I wanted to give a little present to everyone who bought a physical book. And so I had these bookmarks made. And these are as many as I could get on both sides of this bookmark, all the places he visited on his journeys, and in England too, of course, and in his lifetime. So I thought it was rather a nice little treat for everyone. That's the end of my talk, and I'd like to thank you very much for inviting me to talk about my book, Letters of the Unknown Etty, 1793 to 1856, when he died. And thank you very much for listening. On the last page, one more, is information on buying Charles's book. It is on Kindle. So if that's easiest and people like reading books on Kindle, then you can get it through Amazon. And physical books I have here, you would get a bookmark with it, and I would sign it for you if you wished. The book is £20, and the cheapest postage and packing for India is £10. And PayPal is probably the simplest way, unless you had a bank account in England, but I don't know if you would. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much for an engaging talk. It was really nice to hear you and the story that you narrated today. I'm seeing in the chat box there are no questions so far, but I would urge everybody to go ahead and buy a copy for your book. And wish you best wish to for your upcoming books, if you plan to do any, and for the current one. And we would love to see you again on our next online talk.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much. Thank
much
you.
for accepting today.
Okay.
With this, we end today's talk, and I hope to see everybody for our next talk. Vinita is asking, what is the name of the book, please? Again, if you can say.
Letters of the Unknown Etty, 1793 to 1856.
Okay. Thank you so much. See you again for our next online talk.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.